the autonomy economy is real. Commercial robotaxi operations, humanless freight runs, AV infrastructure investment measured in billions. The question is no longer whether autonomous mobility scales. It's who advises the companies building it. KPMG works across the full autonomy ecosystem: operators, OEMs, suppliers, insurers, and investors. At the moment it matters most. When the road ahead is uncertain, we've already been there. KPMG, accelerating what's next in mobility.
Rob, it never ceases to amaze me that autonomy continues to expand globally. Baidu's going to Kazakhstan, more military uses for autonomy, and it's just becoming this global economy that you and I have called and termed the autonomy economy. So lots of signals to break down this week. We're going to go back to our roots, where we're going away from robo, and we're going into all sorts of interesting uses around autonomy. This week, the signals are: Baidu Apollo Go ramps up robotaxis in Hong Kong. Aha, we're still going to have a little robotaxi in there. Second signal, in a first, the U.S. military uses Saronic seaborne drone attack on an Iranian port. Go U.S. military. The third signal, autonomous drones measure volcanic gas clouds offering clear eruption warning signs. So that's cool. We got science here. I love science, and we love our sponsor. So a huge thank you to KPMG for being a wonderful sponsor of Autonomy Signals and making all this happen. Rob, let's dive into the first signal, sir. Baidu, Hong Kong, ramping up the miles. What do we know?
Yeah, this is great. This is just another brick in the wall that robotaxis are going to be transforming mobility around the globe, right? We see it in San Francisco, near where I live. You're out on the streets of Miami and you're seeing it every day. Those are just a few of the places that get to enjoy this technology and benefit from it in 2026. But this technology is going to get everywhere, and I mean everywhere. And so today we're going all the way around the globe. We're taking a look at what's going on in Hong Kong, because just at the end of last month, the Hong Kong Transport Department announced that it had issued 7 pilot licenses covering 63 autonomous vehicles. Now, Baidu holds 3 of these licenses, accounting for 50 of the authorized vehicles that are allowed on the streets of Hong Kong. In the news release, the Hong Kong Transport Department also said that Baidu had been authorized to conduct cross-district driverless trials connecting Airport Island, Sunny Bay, and Tung Chung, which are very important districts on this very small, very dense island. And the government has increased the vehicle limit for Baidu up until 50, and then raised its speed limits to 50 kilometers per hour, which is roughly, if my math is correct, about 30 US miles per hour. And so now testing for Baidu on the island is encompassing complex urban environments, and they're using Baidu's 6th generation RT6 robotaxis. The next step in this evolution, as announced in the press release, was that Hong Kong regulators are actively transitioning toward driverless operations under a dedicated code of practice. So they're developing an AV framework. Now, in that framework, for those who are going to follow closely, and I know there are some that really do, driverless operations are called fully remote controlled in the Hong Kong regs. So while we are not necessarily getting to a global taxonomy, we are seeing global expansion. And I think this is a really big signal for Baidu, as we'll talk about in a minute, for what it portends not only in Hong Kong, but for other markets in the region that are similarly situated to Hong Kong and that perhaps offer real chance for international expansion ahead of Waymo.
I love this. You start the show off with, all in all, it's just another brick in the wall. Bob Ezrin, sir, if you're listening, you did a hell of a job for producing The Wall from Pink Floyd. So I love that. And Bob is a wonderful human being on a personal level. So I love this line. Fully remote controlled. That is a heck of a line. Now, because you and I are sticklers for fine print and doing all the stuff. And we've got the wonderful Omega algorithm that, boy, she does a lot of work for us. When I hear this, and we haven't asked Omega this yet, when I hear fully remote controlled, am I to assume that this is a 1-to-1, 1-to-2 remote operator? How should we think about that? And do you think that we will get clarity in the regs over time?
I think we will get clarity. But for now, the way to read that is that it is relinquishing the driver tasks to the vehicle itself. And that's what they mean by fully remote controlled. The vehicle is being controlled by the driverless system. And so that's what they mean by remote controlled. It's not direct control by the human operator. It's remote controlled by the compute stack. And fully meaning that you don't have some kind of level 3 fallback system, right? That it is a true level 4 driverless operation. So it is a bit of a unique construction of the term. And to be fair, right, Hong Kong is a unique place to begin with, so I'm not surprised. But it is, I think, a signal that Hong Kong is transitioning from these small supervised pilots that existed to a more structured cross-district commercial readiness form of testing. And there is no doubt that Baidu is the primary beneficiary of this regulatory evolution. And so I think this really helps Baidu because it gets to utilize the city's very complex, very dense, right-hand drive urban environment as a strategic proving ground. And to me, it is that right-hand drive urban environment that is the key learnings that Baidu is going to get. It also has, to be fair, this has benefits to Hong Kong itself, right? They are looking to gain credibility as a credentialing hub in terms of providing a validated pathway for L4 technology to come to the island, but then also as a way for it to signal that if you can pass our validated testing and deployment framework, you should be able to gain credibility in other global markets.
To me, and I'm going to put on the wonky geopolitical hat that we've discussed quite a bit here, and we've written about it. At some point, we'll probably release a paper on it. It just emphasizes China's autonomous Belt and Road Initiative, where now you're doing right-hand drive on the left-hand side of the road. That opens up more of a global market where it becomes another, if you want to call it, incubation hub, testing hub to export Chinese autonomy to the world. To me, it is more of a strategic initiative than anything. Yes, is it good for the city-state of Hong Kong? Yes, autonomy is great for the city-state of Hong Kong. But to me, it's more of a geopolitical positioning to further ramp up the exporting of this technology. And then that gets very, very interesting because that opens up the Japanese market potentially. That potentially opens up the UK market because if you look at that, and we've seen all the exports of the vehicles go to those markets, it opens up a lot of new potential markets and is a testing facility very practically close to home.
I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head with that, right? It provides a learning environment unlike any other, right? I don't know, for those folks who haven't been to Hong Kong, it is maybe the most populated vertical place full of people that I've ever been in my entire life. And I've been to a lot of places, and I grew up right on the outskirts of New York City. So I've been around big cities my entire life, and there's almost nothing like Hong Kong, right? Tokyo, different because it's a different scale in terms of just how massive Tokyo is. But Hong Kong is small and it is dense, and it is an environment unlike any other. And to your point, the right-hand drive, left side traffic system is a perfect place to train and certify models for other international markets. You hit the nail on the head. It's Japan, it's the UK, it's Singapore, Australia, Malaysia, they all share these same traffic patterns. And if you can prove that your technology works there under a viable framework, which is why I emphasize the framework to begin with. This is not anybody and anything goes, right? This is going to be a very sophisticated framework. You are going to have a large amount of credibility, and you're going to set yourself up well for export into these much larger markets, right? Japan and Malaysia, the UK, these are significantly larger markets than Hong Kong itself, despite the density in Hong Kong. And so I think this really does provide Baidu an advantage. And I think it's very intentional, as you point out as well.
We're not the only ones reading the tea leaves here. Omega made a prediction. We didn't even prompt for a prediction, but she came out with a prediction here. I mean, she's getting smart. She's eating those Wheaties here. I'm going to read this one to you. Omega predicts that Baidu will announce a commercial Apollo Go pilot in Singapore, Australia, or Japan within 18 months, citing the Hong Kong validation data as a regulatory proof of concept. You and I said it. She's saying it in the data. I think that is 100% spot on. Which one of that I won't make a prediction on that. But it reinforces what you and I have said forever since we started this company, is that autonomy is going global. And it is going to be a global race. And that's why we collectively created the Road to Autonomy indices, the Robotaxi indice, every 12 hours, fully sealed, updating it. You and I have seen a pattern here, and we're going to release more of that data in the coming weeks. There'll be a subscription service for it. Is Baidu and Waymo have been playing a game of ping pong for that number one leader spot, because the data is there. Baidu is much further along than I think most individuals truly realize. And what's happening in Hong Kong, the data that Omega's gathering, is further validating that point of their grand global ambitions.
Agreed. And look, we already know, as you know, we've uncovered at the Road to Autonomy, that Waymo has already set up legal infrastructure in Australia. It already has legal infrastructure and some testing in Japan. And so these are two of the markets through which validation in Hong Kong will make accessibility into those markets, Japan and Australia, much easier. And so there is no doubt in my mind that Baidu is targeting the same markets that Waymo is, and I think is trying to advance its technology in a pace and a fashion that will give it an advantage to not only get there as the first mover, but also get there and show that it's more sophisticated in ability to handle the right-hand drive scenario, right? We here in the U.S. don't drive on the right-hand side of the road. Our vehicles aren't structured for right-hand drive. Waymo's vehicles, what we've seen from the few Jaguar I-Paces that have moved over to Japan, they are still the Americanized version. They are not built for the roads in Japan, per se, for the traditional driver. So it's going to be really interesting how much this Hong Kong effort accelerates Baidu's efforts to continually either meet or exceed what Waymo is doing.
That's a great point. And Omega points out a risk there. Before we get to the risk, I almost wonder if Omega uncovered Baidu Apollo Go filings in Singapore and Australia and Japan. Perhaps we have to look out of that and put it public on X, because perhaps she uncovered some filing data there. She's really good at that, which brings us to the risk. And we're going to stay on this Omega trend here. Omega uncovered this risk as it relates to this Baidu Hong Kong expansion. Hong Kong regulatory environment tightens for autonomous vehicle operations and validating the proving ground thesis and delaying the international rollout. As we all know, and I'm not playing politics, that regulations and policy in China, which is de facto Hong Kong, could literally change in an instant. So to me, that is a very real risk. It's based on purely on geopolitical history, nothing more.
I think this is a significant risk, right? Hong Kong is moving in a very deliberate yet progressing fashion. The press release that I mentioned only refers to 7 licenses granted in a total of 63 vehicles. So it is not as if they have opened up the entire city-state and entire market to level 4 vehicles at this moment. But what they are doing is methodically moving towards that position, being guided by a developing yet assumed to be stricter framework, one that is not as permissive as some of the frameworks that we've seen in other countries or other U.S. states. And you add to that what we know of the pause in mainland China when there was a series of bricking incidences with Baidu vehicles, to be fair, where they paused the issuance of new licenses for an indefinite period of time as a result of those instances. So I think what we see, or what we can expect to see from Hong Kong, is a very strict adherence to safety guidelines, a very quick and swift and heavy response to safety incidents. I think Baidu is not unaware of those challenges, having seen it from being the recipient of such swift and severe penalties in mainland China. But I also think, on the other end, as somebody who believes that regulation can be validating for innovation, that if that is the path that Hong Kong is moving, and if that is the path that Baidu is willing to accept and to go down, and that is the path that Baidu succeeds on, that will only help it in terms of its ability to say to other markets, we are ready for your unique driving circumstances, unlike anybody else.
If you want to use the term, it's a dual validation point. Left-hand drive, right-hand drive. Mainland, Hong Kong. And if you go on the mainland, yes, you do have some dense urban environments, but you do have some more residential rural environments. And if you go into Hong Kong, it's only one, actually two words, dense and denser is how I would describe Hong Kong from that standpoint. And so it's a very, very, I'll use the term good proving ground for them. This brings us to Omega's take here. Omega's take is Hong Kong is deliberately positioning itself as a credential issuing jurisdiction. Oh boy, we know that. By establishing a rigorous, internationally recognized regulatory framework, the city provides a seal of approval that carries weight beyond mainland China. Baidu, as the first mover capturing this credential, is not merely testing technology. It is building a regulatory and data-driven moat. The move towards fully remote controlled operation signals that the jurisdiction is committed to unlocking the cost structures necessary to transition autonomous vehicles from subsidized experiments, and here's the kicker, to profitable commercial services. Let me emphasize again, profitable commercial services. That's the aim of the game. Well done, Omega.
It's great work. It's great work. And I think, look, the one additional thing I'll add is Hong Kong is still very much a crossroads of the world. So having folks from all over the world come and see this technology working in such an environment is also going to be additive towards the process of making Baidu a profitable commercial service.
And I want to emphasize what Rob said about gateway to the world. Let's not forget that is a major hub for Cathay Pacific. So if you wanted to go to New Zealand, Australia, and that part of the world, and going to different parts of Asia, it is a stopover hub. And there's a lot to see culturally and a lot to do. Plus, if you have little kids, there's a Disneyland there, so it's an excuse to take a Baidu to Disneyland. So it's an all-in-all cultural experience there. It is a very prominent market that will continue to be a prominent market. Well, let's get on to Signal 2 here, because Saronic had an autonomous vessel used by the U.S. military and went and blew up an Iranian port and went kablooey. I mean, autonomy is going everywhere. So we're on robotaxis, now we're on autonomous vessels for the U.S. military. What do we know about this signal?
Yeah, this just happened a few days ago. On July 12th, U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM as it's known, executed the first ever combat strike using unmanned surface vessels. 3 Saronic-built Corsair uncrewed surface vessels were deployed to strike a submarine and ship maintenance facility at Iran's Bandar Abbas naval base. The strike was part of a broader campaign to degrade Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. As everybody is probably following, this is a period of escalating tensions after the collapse of the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran. Now, the Corsair, just so folks know, it's a 24-foot autonomous vessel capable of 35 knot speeds. It's pretty fast. 1,000 nautical mile range, which is pretty far, and 1,000-pound payload, which is a lot. Its modular architecture allows for rapid reconfiguration between intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance roles, but also, as used here, kinetic strike roles. And so a little bit more about Saronic. They just announced that they're building this huge shipyard in Austin, Texas. Congratulations to them. Congratulations to Austin. That's going to bring a lot of jobs. And it's also currently fulfilling a nearly $400 million production contract awarded by the Navy in December of 2025. And this use of their Corsair vehicle marks a very defining transition from prototype testing to scaled, doctrine-driven procurement and use. And so this is, I think, a really big deal.
Do you think this is a sign of things to come? Because we saw the Department of War Budget Secretary Hegseth made public and put out there, and if you look at the DepSec that answers Secretary Hegseth, they are putting very pro-military statements out, but at the same time, they're putting out very pro-automation statements. Where, and sitting here as a civilian, reading the statements from the Department of War and some statements from the White House, it seems that this administration and this Department of War are fully engaged in ramping up all sorts of automation for all sorts of combat activity.
Yes, I think there is a doctrinal shift in warfare generally, but also naval warfare in particular. Right? You're seeing this transition from experimental surveillance and rescue roles. You might remember just a few weeks prior to this, it was a Saronic vessel that were rescued two down folks from a helicopter in the Strait as well. Right now, we're seeing this used in kind of an offensive kinetic strike. And so I think what we're seeing is, from the U.S. perspective, and look, there are many parallels that we've already talked about when it comes to Ukraine, right, and what Ukraine is doing. But from a U.S. perspective, we're seeing autonomous swarms and autonomous vessels of all kind as a core component of multi-domain power projection going forward. And I think this is going to fundamentally alter also the cost exchange calculus of maritime conflict, because I think what all powers are trying to balance is, if you have an autonomous drone or vessel that is much cheaper to produce than these large human-driven, operated, capable of mass destruction vehicles and weapons, right, from a battleship to a fighter jet, if those types of things can be taken down or made more difficult to operate due to a vehicle, an autonomous vehicle or weapon that is much more cheaply produced, you run into issues about how much you're willing to spend, how do you defend against that, what is your cost calculus? And I think it is only natural, given what we've seen in Ukraine and now what we're seeing as a continuing shift over to autonomous technology in military warfare, that the cost calculus is self-evident, that you can achieve tremendous strategic effects at a fraction of the traditional crude cost from where we were just a decade ago.
To me, it is a huge positive step for the finances, but it's also a huge positive step for the men and women that risk their lives to protect this country. If we blow up a robot, okay, fine. The robot doesn't have a family. You blow up a human, oh, you've got a tragedy. It is a very extreme positive. And I believe that you are going to see more and more companies go into this, and more companies will talk about the cost benefits. Palmer Luckey was in Japan, and he gave a talk the other day about the cost and why they're building the bombs they're building. And next week on the road to autonomy, very honored. We had the CTO of Shield AI talking about their grand autonomous ambitions, maritime and ground of what they're doing. And defense stuff for autonomy is something that we're going to ramp up our coverage because it's such a hot, important market. That's something that truly is not discussed enough, I believe. And I'm so proud that you and I can sit here to have these conversations as you and I focus on, you want to call it the new emerging class of defense companies that eventually become the big primes. How do you see, because you have a lot of experience in this world, how do you see the traditional tier one primes reacting? I'm not going to name names, but if I'm sitting there in a boardroom and you told a funny story about getting chewed out in a boardroom and I'm a tier one prime, I'm like, I'm sorry to swear, I'm having one of those OSHIT moments. It's wow, what's going on? How do they react?
Yeah, I think so far I have found it very interesting that the tier one primes are not racing to acquire these hardware startups, right? They are repositioning themselves as mission integrators, treating autonomous hulls, in this instance, as expendable peripherals to their proprietary combat systems. And so I think the dominant competitive mechanism emerging from all of this is so far not a wave of full-scale M&A targeting hardware manufacturers, but rather a hybrid model where primes use targeted acquisition, right, such as Ultra Maritime's ASW sensing stack, and strategic minority investments, such as an investment that was recently made in the Sail drone, to own the integration layer while leaving attributable hull production to well-funded neo-primes. And so I think this is going to kind of bifurcate the market into integration dominance held by incumbents and innovation velocity held by startups like Saronic and others like Kraken Technology.
I'll tell you something. It's going to be fascinating and interesting to watch. And I will make a prediction here without naming names because I don't think that's appropriate at this time. A large tier one prime will make a strategic acquisition of a certain dollar amount and they will integrate it, reap the benefits, and then it will start a series of dominoes from an acquisition standpoint. And I don't think that's going to be your tier one startups. I think it's going to be your middle emerging defense startups. But at some point that domino effect is going to go. And when that domino effect goes, it's going to be interesting because that's going to be your middle tier, because in your upper tier, they're already winning all the contracts and they've got the cash flow to support it. And so at some point, one of these larger startups could become a very big competitor to one traditional primes. And if they wanted, they could get to a point where they could acquire that prime, then all of a sudden it turns it upside down. And so I think that's why you're going to see some primes make those, that middle level. If you're a baseball nerd like I am, the AA, AAA purchase, they're going to go try and find that Ken Griffey Jr., the Tino Martinez, the Derek Jeter at AA, AAA. It's going to happen. It's going to be fascinating to see it unfold.
Yeah, I mean, I could very well see that playing out in that manner. I could also see it being just in an adjacent manner, strategic investments in those AA and AAA players, right? Such that they are aligned and have a relationship where the integration layer is important, but that it keeps the market fragmented so that there isn't a consolidation of one of those neo-primes into a true competitor to our current primes. And so I could see maybe using both strategies at the same time, right? Finding which ones that you want to acquire, finding which ones that you want to invest in, and invest in maybe just enough of them to keep that market fragmented so that you don't see a true competitor really develop.
I'm gonna let the audience in on a little secret. You pay very close attention to the Robotaxi market. So the audience, Rob pays very close attention to that because what he elegantly described, this is my opinion, and I'll let him answer this, is Uber's strategy for defense. Okay, so let's go invest in this autonomy company. Let's go invest in this autonomy company. Oh, by the way, you're a missile launcher company. Yeah, we're going to acquire you, just like we acquired Deliveroo. It just seems that somebody you think might take that Uber strategy there. Next thing you know, we're going to get Defense Labs or Defense Labs AI and try and get a higher multiple.
I could very well foresee that happening, right? And we just had a discussion, right, on Road to Autonomy with the AAL, right, the Army Applied Laboratory. And that's really their role, is to facilitate those conversations, right? So we even have the structure in order to facilitate those conversations. And then you add in the DIU and other things, and the fact that a former Uber person is sitting over at the Department of War as well, right? So it's some really interesting future that's going to play out. I think it's going to play out in a much quicker time frame than people expect. And I think that's largely driven by the escalating geopolitical tensions that we see in the world.
Rob's connecting the dots. That's the bottom line. He's connecting the dots. Well, Rob connects the dots. Omega's got some risks. I'll start with the first risk Omega uncovered here. Congressional pushback on autonomous kinetic roles could freeze USV mission expansion and force USVs back into routine ISR, reversing posture shift. That is a risk, and I'm going to go back to civilian close here. Is that potential a change in Congress, a change in Senate, or change in administration? Is that really kind of that risk that Omega's alluding to?
I think it certainly plays along party lines potentially. But I think it also plays with what happens if either intentionally or unintentionally one of these unmanned, uncrewed vessels hits the wrong target, right? You already see this with air campaigns and strategic, air campaigns that we've had in the recent Middle East history, where a drop bomb from a human crewed vehicle lands in the wrong place, right? A school, a hospital, something of that nature, and unfortunately, there's large civilian casualties. What happens in the same scenario when an uncrewed vessel does that? Or what happens when the autonomous system navigating the uncrewed vessel makes a mistake, right? These do bring up legitimate questions of use of force, morality of autonomous weaponry, how it's targeting folks, things of that nature. So I could see both along party lines as well as along, incident response lines is what I'll call it. The use of autonomous weapons in these kinetic encounters at some point coming under question. And I think that is almost inevitable given what we just talked about, which is the trajectory of the use of these types of weapons or these types of systems in kinetic warfare is a doctrinal shift that we're seeing from the current administration and the Department of War. So I would anticipate that this does come up, that this question is almost unavoidable at some time in the near future. I just think what it's in response to will determine the impact of such congressional pushback. If it's a standard type of party line hearing because the Democrats now control the Senate in 2028, I don't think that forces any type of doctrinal shift from the administration. If it's in response to a really bad incident, it could force a doctrinal shift. Right, and you see this. I think we're in the realm of parallels today. You kind of see this some of what's going on with ICE and the encounters with ICE, and the back and forth between the aggressive use of it and then pulling back and then aggressive use of it again. I think we could sort of see some of that play out potentially here.
We know in the history of politics in this country, it's a seesaw, back forth. One party's in power, other party's in power. One party's in power, other party's in power. So it's definitely something to watch, and it's a big risk in what you said if there is an unfortunate incident and it involves a casualty, it involves a civilian. Oh boy, oh boy. So that's something to watch. The next risk here is not nearly as material as that, but is important enough for us to highlight here. VC capital concentration in a few winners leaves mid-tier maritime autonomy startups underfunded, reducing the innovation pipeline available to primes for partnership. Hence, here comes Uber Bank, aka military autonomy Uber Bank. That's what that says to me.
Yeah, I think, right, this is more of a parallel to perhaps what's going on with AI, right? You have a few companies that are just soaking up unheard of amounts of money each round. And if if VCs, follow the similar horde mentality towards, Adderall and a few other select folks, you could see less money going to these mid-tier maritime autonomy startups. Look, I mean, there are a few players in the space, right, that we know of that we follow pretty closely, and there are probably more that are just starting out. But you have Blue Water Autonomy, you have Saronic, you have a few others. I think it's a pretty solid appetite for this type of mixture of physical AI and defense use technology right now. And I think this is a potential concern, but to your point, I don't see this as a nearly as high of a risk as the first risk that we talked about. I think VC money can move in herds at times, but there's generally enough of it around that I don't think it's going to severely diminish the innovation pipeline in this area. And look, I do think one of the primes could easily step in as well and create, like you said, its own little startup, right? Or you have Incatel or others fill in the market.
There's a lot of opportunities in the market, which brings us to Omega's take. The combat debut of the Corsair USV serves a single event for the defense industry. The shift from sensing to striking validates the investment thesis for the autonomy economy. We anticipate a rapid acceleration in procurement volume as the U.S. Navy moves to industrialize these platforms with Task Force 59 and broader fleet operations. The success of this mission provides the necessary operational data to refine autonomy software, communications reliance, and manufacturing capability, effectively de-risking the sector for future capital allocation. Good take there.
I think it's very sophisticated. I think it has a real good finger on the pulse of where this technology is going.
Yeah, I mean, as we say all the time, Omega gets smarter and smarter every day as she ingests publicly available data, proprietary data, and licensed data. She always is getting smarter, and she's always learning things. I mean, the fact that Omega uncovered Signal 3 here, this blew my mind. I said, what are you reading, Science Magazine? I don't know. Are you reading National Geographic or reading Weather Today? I don't know. She's reading something here, because the Signal 3 is autonomous drones measure volcanic gas clouds offering clear eruption warning signs. I mean, this is amazing. We got robotaxis to maritime combat autonomy to weather autonomy. This is truly great. What do we know about this signal?
Yeah, this is another thing where it's just like, it speaks to me in terms of the inevitability of the use of this technology for good, right? I think there are so many things that autonomy can fill in the gaps or create new knowledge that help to advance society and civilization, help it not only in a commercial aspect or in a military aspect or national security aspect like we just talked about, but also just in terms of saving lives, right? And I think what we've seen from the story that Omega uncovered, that there is a tremendous indirect connection between what this technology did and the ability to perhaps save lives in areas of the world where volcanic eruptions are a real possibility and a threat to human safety. So researchers at the Technical University of Munich successfully deployed an autonomous drone system on the Italian island of Volcano as it's called, which I thought was great. The Volcano is off the coast of Sicily, by the way, which is where my family is from. Shout out to Santa Geritano, a little town where my grandparents emigrated from. They use this drone system to generate 3D tomographic maps of volcanic gas concentrations, so measuring the CO2, SO2 ratios. The system utilizes a ground-based laser on the crater rim, with the drone serving as a mobile reflector. And so by operating at altitudes up to 10,000 feet and distances of nearly 5 miles, the system achieves a 5% margin of error. And here's the thing. This architecture eliminates the need for drones to fly directly into corrosive plumes, thereby avoiding hardware degradation and rotor downwash interference. And what goes left to be said here is that none of this would be possible without the autonomous drone, right? Humans cannot physically get close enough to make these measurements, or safe enough, high enough to take these measurements, or to consistently find other means through which to take these measurements. And so, this literally is not possible without autonomy. And I think that's really what to me stands out as really why Omega said, hey guys, take a look at this story. You're going to want to know the signal out of it.
The signal to me as a human is it's removing the danger signals. So you look off the coast of Sicily, but then if you go into Italy, you have Mount Vesuvius. I mean, we also unfortunately what happened in Pompeii. And if you go to Hawaii, you go to other parts of the world where there's active volcanoes. I don't think a lot of it's studied enough. And if there was some, if you want to call it some autonomous permanent infrastructure that would not damage the ecosystem, that could live there and act as an early warning system. Think about the lives that saves. You live in California. I lived there half my life. The early warning systems for earthquakes and how many lives that saves, especially this is going post-Northridge. If you look at the advancement technology post-Northridge in California earthquakes in the San Andreas Fault, the lives that saved. Then imagine you take this technology that Omega uncovered and you put it in underwater volcanoes. And perhaps that could, uncover something there early. Becomes this incredible early warning system that autonomy enables, because if put an individual up there, it's very, very risky. You can't do it every day because it's hazard pay and all sorts of other things, but autonomy can do that. And I'll summarize it this way. Sicily's awesome, but autonomy is a force for good. That's the reason. I want to go visit there just to see the technology. We've also eat some great food, but I got to say that. And we're going to eat village food, not fancy, but we're going to eat village food. This is awesome. I don't know any other way to say it besides this is awesome.
Yeah, it's great, right? I mean, it just really just validates the danger removal thesis of a lot of these things that autonomy can do, right? I mean, the highest human ROI for an autonomous system is found where the alternative is human exposure to hazardous environments, right? In this case, corrosive plumes and toxic zones and things of that nature, right? No less the danger of just being around a volcano or an active one in that matter. And so it's just like another example of this danger removal thesis, this early trigger warning thesis, the things that it can do to really benefit, humanity in the sense of really that word in its highest sense, right? This is not a technology, to be fair, that is going to earn the inventors of this and the users of this a tremendous amount of money. The signal here is not necessarily in the commercial application, right? The signal here is, yes, there are still things of technical progress, and yes, there are still things with how do we work in a hybrid society between the integration of humans and autonomy that need to be developed and worked on, and progress is being made in there, but it's not straight line, nothing ever is. But this is the stuff where it's like, hey, sometimes we have to take a step back and realize, the ultimate goal of a lot of these things is to make the world a safer place. And this technology, in this instance, is achieving that goal. It's not only set out to do it, it is achieving that goal.
Achieving that goal, it's also validating that autonomy can work in GPS-denied environments and extremely hostile weather environments. It is validating that. It is positive all around. There is no way else to describe that, but it's positive all around. But as we do every section, Omega uncovers the risk. And here's the risk for this one. The autonomous drone volcanic monitoring story is a Rorschach test revealing a sector in structural transition. The underlying hardware and navigation science is real but commercially immature. The regulatory architecture is mitigating safety authority from onboard sensors to ADSP intermediaries, and defense capital has so thoroughly eclipsed civil applications that environmental use cases like volcanic monitoring now function primarily as a regulatory proof of concept rather than a standalone commercial thesis. That's the business side of Omega. The humanity side of me, which is not Omega, says this risk shall pass because no matter what, as you said, it will become a $1 trillion business. No, but it'll become a business that could save potentially millions of lives. So risk may be, but very positive for society.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting the kind of second part, right? After the Rorschach test of what you see and what you don't. Beyond just this particular story and use case, there was that interesting note that defense capital for drones is eclipsing civil applications for drones. That may be worth a discussion for a whole different autonomy signals, but I do think even when Omega is not intentionally trying to draw out a larger narrative, it has done so here. I think that really stood out to me as like, you know what, that is very true, whether with regards to this particular civilian application or generally. And I think that's something that we should look into in the future as well.
Well, we're going to make a future episode there. See, this is on the record, so we're going to bookmark that here publicly for a future episode, which brings us to Omega's take. This ties into what you said. In the drone market, the primary market driver has migrated to artificial offensive swarms, loitering munitions, and counter UAS systems, as evidenced in the fiscal year 2027 Department of War budget's 24,000% DAWG increase and the 100 million DIU orchestrator challenge. Civil and environmental drone applications are now economically marginal relative to defense capital allocation, which is operating on compressed procurement timelines driven by real-world conflict deployment. The autonomy economy has entered a defense monopolized industrial cycle where expendable platforms define R&D priorities, talent flows, and supply chain investment. That's a really good take, because potentially with this volcanic technology, that could potentially be deployed into theater, into a combat zone.
Yeah, I think what Omega is saying is like, in the moment, given the moment we're in with the geopolitical tensions that we have, whether it's in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, the on-again, off-again conflict in Iran, the potential conflicts that we're, could be ahead, hopefully won't be ahead, but could be ahead, whether that's continued Russian aggression towards NATO countries, whether that's something in Asia, that right now the attention of the investor world in terms of drone applications is very much focused on defense. And I think that is very true. I just think that Omega is, under selling a little bit the civilian applications, because we know that's growing as well. And that's why I think we want to reserve another conversation for it. I think it's very true in this context. And I think Omega, as always, is on the ball. But I also think this is one of the reasons why folks may want to talk to you and I at times, right? There's the in the moment context and there's the future context. And I think only people who really understand the market, who understand the technology, who understand what it's like and where it's going, can give you that additional layer. So that's a fancy way and a fancy pitch to say, if you want to use our advisory services, please reach out to Grayson and myself at alpha@autonomy.ai. We're happy to have a conversation with you, let you know all about the different products and services that Autonomy AI offers, and just get a chance to know you, have a good conversation, and we'll see where those conversations lead.
Yeah, reach out. We're a hybrid shop. We have the AI technology, but we also have the human brains, and we augment it, as Rob said. Reach out. We have a lot that we can offer the market. And Rob and I will be here every Thursday, as we are each and every week, breaking down the signals in the autonomy economy into KPMG. Thank you for being a wonderful sponsor and making this show happen. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is autonomy for humanity's sake. Rob, great show again.
Always love it.